It is very rare for somebody to actually find a meaningful relationship, a marriage, a long-term commitment from one of these dating apps. Was it originally intended that way? Is this by design?
Some experts say these dating apps keep people locked in an endless cycle of matches and rejections.
Or have dating apps evolved into a malevolent monster over time, exploiting people's emotions and preying on their insecurities?
And many end up feeling more disconnected and lonely than before.
It's not really about like men's attitudes, it's just that like, well,
Let's dive into why dating apps have become such a hellscape. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Haley and I help people recognize their full potential by exploring all aspects of the mind-body connection. So today we're going to be diving into the main elements of toxicity that I have noticed within dating culture, primarily those being the something better is always around the corner mindset, the disposable nature of human beings, the rampant emotional unavailability and unhealed trauma that's found on these dating apps, and also the overwhelming shiny new object syndrome bombardment that we have of infinite possibilities of potential partners. So if you're interested in following me down this rabbit hole, let's get into it. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. It would mean the absolute world to me. So I want to start this off by saying I know there's people out there that have had success with dating apps. I have friends in my life who've met their husbands and wives on Tinder, who have met their boyfriends and girlfriends on Bumble, and in my experience and in most people's experience that I've spoken to, that is the exception. It's not the rule. The first area that I want to address with this is the idea of endless options. When dating apps first rolled out, I genuinely believe they were created with the purest of intentions. I think these creators of these apps were genuinely trying to make a platform that people could find meaningful connections with, expand their potential partners, and find somebody who had common interests. And at first, it was successful. At first, it was interesting, it was provocative, it was attention grabbing. Because before the age of social media and before the age of dating apps, our dating pool was very small. If you think even about 30, 40, 50 years ago, about your parents' generation, your grandparents' generation, their pool of potential partners was infinitely smaller than the options that we have today. If you grew up in the 50s or the 60s, odds are the only potential partners that you had were people that lived in your town, people that worked at your job, people that you went to school with, people that were your neighbors. At most, you probably had about 50, maybe 75 people to choose from, and that's being extremely generous. Whereas now, you can swipe through hundreds of people a day on a dating app. So back then, we had a smaller pool of people to connect with, and by default, we were more incentivized to actually create a meaningful connection with those people. There were only 50 people in your town and you found a person that you were genuinely interested in, you wouldn't be looking at your neighbor, you wouldn't be looking for the next best thing, you would be holding on to them and appreciating how much of an amazing match they are for you and really working towards building something meaningful with them. Whereas now we've completely devolved from that mindset to swiping on hundreds and hundreds of people a day, which I don't think is good for our mental health. I don't think that evolutionarily we were meant to be exposed to this many potential suitors. And this has an effect on our psychology, there's no doubt about it. And the biggest effect on that being that we're dehumanizing people and viewing them as disposable objects through the act of swiping. Most people say that you make a first impression about someone within 7 seconds of meeting them, and that's in person, right? If you see someone out at a restaurant, if you meet someone in person, you have a subconscious impression that you've made of that person for many different areas of their life, their career, their personality, their hygiene levels, all these different things. When you're on a dating app, you can swipe right or swipe left on someone in less than a second. And how can we reduce someone to a swipe in less than a second? That is dehumanizing someone. How can you possibly get the full picture of what someone has to offer in 5 photos, in a couple of little descriptions written in a biography? You really can't. And so this culture of people becoming disposable has eroded our sense of what it takes to actually build a meaningful connection. And it's also created this subconscious narrative that no matter what, something better will always be just a swipe away. And that constant pursuit of perfection that you're never going to find creates a dissatisfaction with any relationship that you're trying to build, A, and B, sets up a false expectation and a false sense of what it actually means to be with someone. Because these dating apps have trained our subconscious mind to believe that there's always going to be someone who's better looking, there's always going to be someone who's more successful, smarter, more well-rounded, always just a way at a swipe of a finger. And if you're participating in these dating apps and participating in this dating culture, it's very hard to escape the mindset that something better will always be around the corner for you. We've become completely engrossed into it, and I want to point out that this goes for both men and women, this culture of disposable partners. Both men and women equally can partake in this idea of something always better being around the corner. So going off of the endless options issue when it comes to dating apps, there's something else that I want to point out that I really haven't heard that many people discuss. And that's that dating apps are essentially gambling. Now I want to touch back on something that I mentioned earlier, and that's that at their creation, dating apps had very good intentions. They were created to connect people with others who matched their interest, who shared their passions, and who shared what they were looking for. But I think we can all agree that in this day and age, dating apps are not what they were originally intended to be. All of these dating apps, especially with the introduction of premium features, are preying on people's insecurities and banking on the fact that people who are insecure are going to be spending money in order to find the match and find the relationship that they're desiring. And there's a YouTuber named Healthy Gamer Gigi that actually spoke about this in one of his videos. But essentially, these apps are created, or at least now in how they've evolved, to get you matches. And that's it. These apps are designed to get you matches and nothing else beyond it. Because how would these apps be profitable? How would they be creating more money? How would they be getting more users if they actually did what they were supposed to do? These apps would not be successful if you actually found a meaningful relationship from them and everybody else that you knew found exactly what they were looking for from them. They are banking on the fact that you're going to be coming back to them time and time again, even after you've had matches, because they know that the date is probably not going to be successful and that you're going to just keep swiping and keep feeding the narrative and keep feeding that disposable culture and that endless option bandwagon. And the premium features are designed for just that. They promise you that you're going to be shown to better people, that you're going to be put at the top of the stack, that you're going to have better matches, that you're going to have better photo auto recommendations for the best possible photo that you can use. This idea of commodifying the dating process really reminds me of gambling, and that's something I haven't heard anyone else discuss. If you go to play a slot machine, you go up, you got your money from the casino, you got your chips, and you pull that lever. First time you pull it, you don't get what you wanted. Obviously, you want all the numbers or the symbols to match so that you can win the jackpot. As with gambling, the more that you play, the more you increase your odds of winning that jackpot and of being successful. So you pay more money to keep hitting that slot machine lever, and you keep pulling that lever, pulling that lever, pulling that lever, hoping that eventually one day you're gonna land something that's good and you're gonna land something that's going to get you a little bit of money. Now, the premium services on these dating apps operate in the same exact way. When you sign up for a premium membership, whether it's with Bumble, with Tinder, with Hinge, they are promising you the potentiality of finding a great match, the potentiality of being exposed to somebody who could maybe be interested in you, the potentiality of improving your profile so that maybe you get a little bit more attention. Do you see where I'm going with this? There's nothing that is guaranteed to you or set in stone in writing when you are purchasing a premium membership for these online dating services. The only thing that it guarantees you is that you will be more dependent on those premium services in order to try to find yourself a match. And a lot of people have speculated that some of these dating apps will purposely show you really ugly people for your most compatible, or they will purposely push you to the bottom of the algorithm so that you're incentivized to pay for a premium membership. And it's by design. As I mentioned, the intention of these dating apps has changed over time because they saw an opportunity to monetize and to make money off of people's insecurity. And what's the biggest way that people are insecure? When they've been on these dating apps for a long period of time and they've done a bunch of swiping and they've done a bunch of looking around, but they're still coming up short. And I know tons of people that I've spoken to that have had this experience of spending a lot of time on these apps, trying to craft their profiles properly, trying to write good things about themselves, putting themselves out there, starting conversations, and feeling like they're coming up short. And what happens in that case? You start to get insecure about yourself. You start to wonder, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I need to fix this about myself. Maybe I need to be doing more on these apps. And that's the key part of it. That is the intrinsic nature of how these apps have evolved over time, especially in 2023 right now. That's the exact path of thought that they want you to go down. They want you to be insecure enough that you will pay for the premium membership so that you can become dependent on spending money on them so that they can continue to profit off of the fact that you're insecure and that you feel like you can't find somebody who's actually interested in you. The detachment that's offered to you by courting someone in the digital realm or getting to know somebody in those early stages through texting, through messaging on an app, prevents you from creating an emotional commitment. So this goes back to what we were saying earlier about something better always being around the corner. People are afraid to fully invest 100% into one person at a time. And again, because of how these apps are designed, people don't feel the incentive to commit to one another as much as they would have in the real world or if you didn't meet on a dating app. So even if you've narrowed it down to like 10, 20 matches even, there's no emotional commitment and there's no incentive for you to actually commit to one particular person because you've been presented with so many different options. And because you're communicating with this person behind a screen, through texting, it also creates a false sense of intimacy. I know so many people that have said, oh, well, we've texted for a month, he's so into me, and then he ghosted me. Or even for guys too, they've said, oh, well, I was texting her for all of this time, I was chatting with her, we were planning to hang out, and then boom, nothing happened. Texting is really not how you get to know one another. You're talking to a screen. You're not reading the nuanced body language. You're not actually communicating effectively with one another. Whereas if you were to just meet someone in person and get to know them, you would know if that connection is there or if it's not. And so many people get disappointed because they get caught in this cycle of texting and thinking that it means something, when in reality that person's got one foot in the door, one foot out the other, and they're probably chatting with 5 to 10 other people at the same time that they're chatting with you. Sheer volume of potential partners on dating apps presents that paradox of choice, right? Think about if you were to go into a Baskin-Robbins. I think their slogan is that they have 31 flavors of ice cream. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments on that, but if you walk into an ice cream shop and they have over 30 delicious flavors of ice cream, caramel, pistachio, chocolate chip, mint chocolate chip, cherry, whatever flavors you love. If they have all of these options, you're gonna have a very hard time in that ice cream shop deciding which one you wanna go with and which one you actually wanna get served. Whereas if you go to a different ice cream shop down the street, maybe they only have 3 flavors. Let's say they only have chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. By that nature, you're going to commit to one of those flavors a lot sooner than you would at that ice cream shop that's offering you 30 plus flavors. Goes back to what I said about previous generations and their dating experience. They didn't have the paradox of choice that paralyzed them that we're dealing with right now as a generation. Dating apps have also ruined interpersonal communication skills. Even though these platforms encourage the initial contact, they lack the nuance of that face-to-face, in-person interaction. And that lack of face-to-face contact can make it a lot harder to connect with someone in person on a deep and a meaningful level. And I was talking about this with a friend earlier today, actually, and he was telling me that when he goes to approach women in public to ask for their phone number, all of his guy friends look at him like, whoa, dude, that's crazy. We can't believe you just did that. Whereas that was the norm 30 years ago, was to just go up to someone, walk up to them and ask for their number. But so many people, and men specifically nowadays, are afraid to even approach people in person, yet they'd rather hide behind a screen on a dating app and text somebody and then never actually have to follow through with any commitments that they've made or even meeting someone. And in addition to all these communication issues, dating apps are a breeding ground for people who are emotionally unavailable, have insecure attachment styles, and have unhealed trauma, and they're dumping it onto the next person. Now, not everyone on a dating app is using it for validation or is using it with malicious intent. In fact, there's a lot of people out there who are genuinely using these apps to find something meaningful, to find a relationship, to find marriage, to find somebody that wants kids. But such a huge problem that we run into is that so many people nowadays are afraid of commitment. I'm sure you've heard the story of people having 2-month situationships and the men usually will back out at the 2-month to 3-month mark, and also women do it too. I'm not excluding any gender in this. Both genders are capable of being emotionally unavailable, but when things start to get real, when that level of vulnerability is encouraged, when that next stage of that relationship is coming, people back out because, again, they have that subconscious seed planted in their minds that something better is just a swipe away. I can stay in that zone of familiarity where I don't have to expose myself and I don't have to be too vulnerable because something better will be right around the corner, and I can start this process all over again and keep it safe, keep it surface level, keep it comfortable, because that's all I'm emotionally capable of doing. A lot of these people that are on the dating apps really need to sit with themselves and examine themselves and understand why they are perpetuating that pattern, because yes, the foundation of the apps is the problem. The way they are designed, especially with the premium features, is a huge issue. But the other part of that issue and the other part of that equation is the users themselves not taking accountability for their own actions. The users themselves not taking accountability for the part that they play in being emotionally unavailable, or on the flip side of that, being afraid to set boundaries for themselves, being afraid to be upfront about their intentions from the start. I think a lot of people with insecure attachment styles, whether you're anxious or avoidant, find themselves stuck in this cycle on dating apps, especially for avoidant people. They get in that cycle of dating someone for a few months, dipping out before things get too serious because they're afraid to get that vulnerable, rinse and repeat, experiencing that cycle all over again. Whereas the anxious attachment people are continuously attracting those same kinds of partners that are the avoidants because they're perpetuating that narrative and they haven't really done a fair amount of inward reflection or shadow work or understanding why they're showing up that way and why they keep experiencing the same pattern on the dating apps. And it's almost like we're stuck in this endless cycle of experiencing the same kinds of partners over and over again, experiencing the same disappointments, experiencing the same setbacks when it comes to relationships, hearing the same excuses, hearing time and time again that I'm not ready yet, or I'm not looking for a relationship, even when we've been told at the beginning, whether it's through their profile or what they've spoken to you about, that that's what they're looking for. And I want to say this isn't limited to just dating apps themselves. I think this is a problem that generationally we're all experiencing, regardless of if you're on dating apps or not. But I think the design of dating apps and the nature of how they are used is perpetuating this toxic cycle of unhealed trauma and emotional unavailability. Now, before I get into what some of you guys have shared with me about your dating experiences, I want to touch on how dopamine plays a role in why we become chemically addicted to the experience of dating apps. So whenever you're swiping right on someone and you're receiving a match, it's creating a dopamine spike in your brain. And this has further complicated modern dating culture because this is firing and wiring the anticipatory and reward centers of your brain. And it's also triggering a cycle of instant gratification. And the more that you're swiping each and every single day, the more that you're firing and wiring those networks in your brain to be trained to receiving that instant gratification. If you're not familiar, there's something called neuroplasticity that basically tells us that if we repeat actions over and over again, that's how they're going to be formed as habits in our brain. So if you're swiping every single day, if you're starting your day, ending your day with swiping on people, hundreds of people at a time, feeling that dopamine spike when you're receiving that match, feeling that dopamine spike even when you swipe left on someone, or if you start to have a conversation with someone, you have literally trained your brain, Pavlovian dog bell style, to rely on that motion of swiping in order for you to get that dopamine increase. In the same way that when someone becomes an alcoholic, they've trained their brain to rely on alcohol in order to give them an artificial spike of dopamine, you have trained your brain to give you an artificial spike of dopamine through the act of swiping and through the act of matching and striking up a conversation with someone that you deem attractive. It's not about finding someone. It's not about finding a relationship or finding something meaningful. It's about you getting that dopamine spike and you giving yourself that reward that your brain needs and feels good from because you've trained yourself to adopt that behavior through the act of continuously swiping day in and day out. So dating apps really become an all-encompassing and all-consuming monster, like I mentioned earlier in this video. They've become a malevolent monster in the sense that, among all the other things I've mentioned here, your brain has literally become addicted to the artificial dopamine spike that it's giving you. So yesterday I asked my Instagram followers what their experience was with dating apps, and I got tons of amazing feedback, and I really appreciate every single person that expressed their vulnerability to me and shared their experience. If you're not following me on Instagram yet, go ahead and do that. I love chatting with you guys over there and connecting with you. So I want to share a few things that people have shared with me about their experience. I'm recently not single anymore, but was on the dating apps for a while and such. Went on a ton of dates, but with the apps, there was no way to have that initial attraction as when you're in the same room as someone. You can't feel their energy and it's so off and takes a lot more work to get that quote spark. By the time the date comes around, you have painted a picture of them in your head that could be so far from the truth because the way of meeting is so artificial. I've met some great people on those apps, and not to say they aren't worth the time, but there will be a lot more no's and false expectations rather than success. So I think that's a really good point. And something else that I've noticed with dating culture, now I will say that I myself have experienced dating apps. I've been on a few dates. I've met some decent people from them, but like this person shared with me, I've had a very similar experience because when you're chatting with someone, when you're texting them, talking to them through the app, you think you have this person figured out. You think you've got their whole story. Maybe you've done your Nancy Drewing, you've done your homework, making sure they're not a catfish, making sure they're real, which the fake profiles is another issue in and of itself, which is probably a topic for another video. But when you've created that image of the person in your head, there's little left to the imagination. There's little anticipatory surprise left. And on top of that, it can also lead to a lot of disappointment if you've already put this person on a pedestal in your head mentally based on their pictures, their profile, the things that they're texting you, if they're texting you good morning every single day. And then you finally meet them in person maybe 3 weeks later and you realize that they just don't live up to the spark. It's definitely setting you up for a lot of disappointment in that way. And the other thing I think too is that in real life dating, right, without a dating app, if you have a friend who tells you to go on a blind date with one of their friends, there's still that mystery and there's still that elusiveness and that excitement and those butterflies that you get because you don't know the person's whole story yet. You have so much that you can ask about them and learn about them and see if there's a real connection. And meeting someone organically like that, you still have a higher chance for creating that spark and creating that element of real meaningful connection. Whereas if you've met someone online or through a dating app, you've already gotten to know them through a screen so much that many times what happens is when you finally meet them in person, the experience is entirely underwhelming. Here's another one that somebody shared with me. I feel like because of dating apps and social media, people think that they have so many options out there and are just so quick to find a reason to move on from someone and try to find something better without really trying. Dating is like Netflix, LOL. Unless someone you trust recommends it or you have an immediate connection with it, you're probably going to try to find something else to watch. This is probably one of my favorite analogies because I've never heard anyone compare dating apps to Netflix, but it makes so much sense. Netflix is again the paradox of choice. How many times have you gone onto Netflix and had a really hard time even settling on a movie or a TV show because you're just bombarded with so many hundreds of options? You don't even know where to start. Dating is the same way. You're bombarded with hundreds of people each and every single day at your disposal, at your fingertips. So you know how much harder it's gonna be for you to actually choose something that you want? I think another part of that equation too is that social media plays a role into the dating app experience as well. If you find someone on a dating app and you maybe creep on their social media and maybe they don't live up to the standard that you have, if they don't have enough followers, if they don't have enough of a established presence, then they may not live up to that mental picture that you've painted, thus again leading to that disappointment. So I think that's a really interesting analogy and really highlights the disposable nature of people on dating apps and also the paradoxical nature of how many choices we have and how those overwhelming amounts of choices leave us stagnant. In conclusion, dating apps have fundamentally transformed the way that we approach dating in this generation. The way that the apps are designed themselves incentivize people to spend money in order to have the potential chance of meeting someone without any promise that that spending is actually going to be lucrative. Not to mention the fact that many people are emotionally unavailable, they always think something better is going to be right around the corner, and we're essentially relying on dating apps in order to artificially spike dopamine in our brain. As we navigate this digital landscape, it's essential to remain mindful, especially if we're partaking in dating culture and using these dating apps. It's also important to recognize the potential pitfalls that exist within the inherent design of these dating apps. These dating apps at face value might seem like they offer an abundance of opportunities for us to match with a potential partner, but the reality of the matter is that they hide the dark truth. People are emotionally unavailable, people bring their baggage into the next relationship, people rely on dating apps in order to artificially spike their dopamine, and the apps themselves are designed in order to get you to spend money because they prey on the fact that you're insecure and that you're not finding anything beyond a match. And with this knowledge in mind now, hopefully we can work towards cultivating genuine connections and actually getting to know one another on a real deep level, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, feeling empowered enough to feel vulnerable, and feeling confident enough to give things a shot, to actually see the relationship through rather than staying in that toxic cycle of always thinking that something better will be just a swipe away. I certainly hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found some insight from this. I truly think that dating apps have ruined modern dating for us as a generation and as a society, but honestly, I think the best revenge is to just get out there and meet people in person. Stop giving these dating apps your money. Stop being a part of the problem. You know, take some time to reflect on your own choices and even your own tendencies with how you show up on these apps. And I'm curious, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What has your experience been with dating apps? In my experience from the people that I've asked about this, both men and women have come to the same consensus. We're tired and we're fed up with dating culture the way that it is right now, and none of us want to be on dating apps. It's not a place that anybody wants to be, yet we can't seem to find a way to escape from it. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future videos. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there with dating, use your discernment, and I'm wishing you nothing but the best. I'll see you next time.